What's up, YouTube? It's probably like 3 in the morning right now. I get off work at like 2:30, depends on the day, 2 to 2:30. Um, but each and every night I always go to bed and I kind of reflect on where God may have been trying to speak to me throughout the day. Um, what could I have done better? Just kind of critiquing myself between me and the Lord. Um, and I encourage you, brothers and sisters, to try the same thing. Try to draw as close as you can to God throughout the day. The Bible talks about praying without ceasing, and there's very few moments throughout the day to when I'm, not thinking about God. I'm not here to brag on myself or anything like that, but when God truly becomes your focus throughout the day, you're always thinking about, is God trying to speak to me? Is God, doing these things? So I just kind of, encourage you guys to keep your mind on the Lord, because your actions will be a lot more guarded, because you're constantly thinking, is this going to affect my relationship with God? Is this going to, cause me to backslide? Is this decision looking more towards an evil decision or more towards a good decision, right? So it's really good to keep our mind totally focused on God and His will throughout the day. But like I was saying, as I go throughout, like before I go to bed, I always think like, what could I have done better, um, all that type of stuff. But another thing I always think about is I always think about future conversations that I'm gonna have with someone who doesn't believe, right? As believers, our whole goal is to be sharing the gospel, right? Um, so I always have made up conversations with myself against myself if I was an unbeliever or an imaginary person who may be an unbeliever. And, the same questions always come about, you'll find when you start sharing the gospel. The main one would be, why does a good God allow evil? That'll be the biggest question you always get. And there's a couple, not theories, but reasons I believe, what, why he does, or, how we're supposed to look at it. So my first one is this: when dealing with God, everything is for His glory, right? Everything is for our good, and then for His glory. Everything works out for our good, and then everything in general is for God's glory, right? So what we see as evil, what He's trying to show us is He can take a bad situation and turn it into something better. So what we think is bad, He turns into the best thing for us. Prime example: the greatest tool the devil had, which was death, God then took it and turned it into the best thing, right? Jesus rose from the dead. So that was His greatest accomplishment. The greatest weapon the enemy had was death. But then God turned that into the best gift for us. Do you see what I'm saying? So what we think is bad, God turns it into something better, right? So when you're going through a situation, you're asking God, why is this happening to me? Just think He's going to turn that into His glory. He's going to turn that bad situation, what we think is bad, into something better. And then check this out. So, a lot of people always ask me, how do we know God's real? And then I'll tie this into the evil thing. Um, but then my next question, when somebody says, why does a good God allow evil, or how do we know God's real? The first thing I always say, well, the very fact that we even have to debate if there's a God or not makes me lead towards that there is a God, because we have to have some type of consciousness to be able to defer, oh, there's something higher than me. And then also, where does morality come from? Like, what do you see as good and evil? Do you see what I'm saying? People always try to say, like, a God can't be real because there's evil everywhere. Well, for us to know that something is evil, we have to have an assumption or put in us that something is also good. So we have to have a distinguishment between good and evil, right? And Satan tries to blur those lines, right? For example, um, obviously, right, no matter who you go to, as long as they're not demonically influenced at all, you can go to any person and say, this is the question I always ask them. I go, okay, so if if good and evil are relative or whatever, and it's just made up, then I can go murder a child, right? I'll tell them it's okay for me to go murder a child, and they always get kind of stuck. And I'm like, by your standards of saying good and evil, blah 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 blah, I can go murder a child and consider it good for me, right? If morality is just, random, I can go kill a child and tell you and say because I think it's good, that means it's good. Obviously not. Killing a child is wrong. Murdering is wrong, right? Out of malice is totally wrong. Um, but then, it comes down to the lie that Satan told you will be as the gods. So people are always trying to justify themselves as I decide what's right and wrong. I decide blah, 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 blah. But inherently, we know what's good and what's evil. But then the devil comes and tries to blur those lines. For example, with um, sex outside of marriage, right? He is trying to deem that okay, and you'll notice, my fellow brothers and sisters, when we look around the world, we'll see 95% of people are having immoral sex outside of marriage. And it's so normal now that when you say, "Oh, I'm waiting till marriage," that is now seen as the weird thing. That is now seen as the extreme, belief. So Satan's trying to blur those lines, but we know what's right and what's wrong because God put that in us. God put that in us. So, the whole good and evil thing. When looking at evil, we have to realize we're just mortals, man. We have to realize we're nothing. God has to take into account so many other things other than just our inconvenience. We like to say, because I'm inconvenienced, God can't be real. Because I went through this little hiccup, God can't be real. Because God took my father away from me, he can't be real, right? But we're in our mortal minds because God knows of all eternity. He was before time was created. He is going to be after time is done. We can only conceive our here and now, right? But once we step outside of ourselves, outside of our ego, we see that God has to take into account eternity, right? So, for example, let's say you will never, God knows how we think. God knows how each and every person thinks. Imagine this. You will never, if God, let's say God takes away, your dad from you, right? Or not even that, like your dad dies, not God takes him away, but your dad dies, it was his time. Let's say God knows if your dad lived as long as you lived, you would never go and seek God or ever question God or anything about God, right? If as long as your dad lived, you would never, do whatever with God. You'll never go and seek him. And then that will lead you to eternal hellfire. God knows this. But let's say God takes away, your dad or your dad comes his time. God takes into account, oh, my daughter's going to think this way. My son's going to think this way. And they're going to question me. And then they're going to seek me. And then they're going to find me, right? So God's going to save your dad and taking him up to heaven. But if he never did that at this time period, not taking into account your eternity for your comfort, if he kept your dad there or, whoever there, and you never sought after God because you were comfortable, then you're doomed to eternal hellfire. But because God knows this, he's going to say, man, in order to get two souls instead of just the one, I'm going to have to take this one away right now. So whoever is left seeks me and questions me and then goes, oh, this is eternity. That's what's at stake. Let me follow God now. Let me do these things now. Let me seek after, Jesus. Now God has two souls instead of the one. So we have to take into account every little thing, but we can't do that. Only God does, which is why we have to trust his judgment. So whatever we think is evil may not be evil. It just may be a hiccup or inconvenience to us that we may be able to see God's glory in the end of it, at the outcome. That's the kind of God we serve. He knows, what's going to happen, what already has happened, what is happening. God knows all these things, and he takes all that into account when he's doing his righteous judgment. So we can't shake our little fist at God and say, why is there evil in the world? Why is this? Why, right? Because we know it's all for his glory. It's all for God's glory. I'm kind of just rambling because I'm tired, but this is what I think about at night, guys. So just welcome. I'll probably go for a few more minutes. It's been about 10 minutes. I'll probably ramble for a few more minutes. But yeah, man, it's all about God's glory. It's all about God's glory. And to those of you who may have lost children, right? Parents, I totally feel for you, but I urge you, don't take your faith away from God. God, he knows our hearts. He never gives us anything more than we can bear, even though it may seem like, man, I can't take this. Oh man, this is crushing me. This is killing me. Give it to God, and He'll take it away, and He'll make you a testimony for other people who may not know God, right? And they're going through the same situation. Prime example, myself. I told you before, my dad passed away not too long ago, just a few months ago. But God is continuously putting people in my path who have lost parents but don't know God. So I'm able to tell people, oh, I found God even more through the loss of my dad, and this is how it's done. And then they'll trust you more because it's authentic. Anybody can come up, like, for example, I'm gonna turn the camera here. So sorry if that caused any. I'm gonna do it this way. My arm just getting tired. But when someone, from personal experience, someone, after my dad died, people would come up to me and go, "Man, I'm so sorry." Not that I didn't believe them or was grateful for it, but it's like, it's almost like, man, you don't even know. You're just saying stuff like, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you don't know what I'm going through, right? That was an immediate thought, and I never told them that. Of course, I was just like, oh, thanks, man. I appreciate the love, blah 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 blah. But in my heart, I was like, man, you can say you're sorry all day long, but you don't know what I'm going through. Like, you don't understand this pain I'm going through. Like, you just saying stuff. But when someone else has gone through that pain, and then you can tell them, this is how I got out that situation, it becomes authentic. And now you can speak with authority over that person's life and say, I got through it because I know Jesus Christ. He's the one who healed my heart. He's the one who came to me in the midnight hour when I was crying. And he comforted me. He told me everything was all good. And then, people cling on to that authenticity, right? So whatever situation you're going through, if you question in God, I encourage you to seek God more, because in turn, you will save many other people around you who are going through that exact same situation. And then you are a walking testimony. And then God will not leave you empty or without. God's gonna then fill your heart where you think a void is. He's gonna come into you and become more of a father, more, fill that missing part of a child, right? God's just gonna come in, and then you're gonna be a walking testimony and bring Him all sorts of souls and glory. And see, your conception of life is so limited because some people think it's just death and that is it. But God knows there's an eternity, so He knows you will see your child again. You will see these things again, but in turn, I need these many souls, because without you, I can't reach these souls. So I'm sorry that I may have to take away, a parent or a child for you to seek me, but I know there's an eternity. I know without that event taking place, all these souls will be doomed to hellfire. I know this, so I have to do this, my child, because it brings me glory and it brings you love and safety. But people want to get caught up in their own selves and say, God, how can you do this, when they don't humble themselves and say, you know what, God, you did this. What can I learn from this? What can I do to bring you more glory out of my bad situation that I think is bad, right? So we always have to ask ourselves, when we're going through a situation, how can I make this bad situation go for God's glory? And God is already working in that way to bring Himself glory. So we just have to put ourselves away and say, God, your will be done. I may be sad right now, but comfort me and show me what I can do to make this situation glorify you, right? That's what we got to do, family. But yeah, man, why does a good God allow evil? That is a subjective question, man. That is subjective. Why does a good God allow evil? That would be the easily the most asked question you get from atheists or people who ride the fence, right? Why does a good God allow evil? Yeah. But then we gotta also remember, I said this before, or just now, God has a concept of eternity. Many people don't have a concept after death. Their whole concern is, when I die, that's it. It's game over. So they're trying to live to the fullest, not knowing there's an eternity after. So, one thing that really improved my faith with God is knowing how real he was and knowing there was something next, right? So many people can't conceive next. They can only conceive now. So they act now and don't prepare for the next. They don't prepare for eternity. And that sadly will be a downfall of a lot of people is they can't conceive God and after God, or sorry, death and after death. They want to believe in God because they want to believe in something after, but the truth of the matter is they can't conceive eternity, which is why people get so people have no hope when someone dies. It's because they can't conceive after death, right? But when you become true, when you know God and know the truth of eternity, when someone dies, you almost like, man, when is it gonna be my time? Like, I'm ready to meet the Lord. Like, when is it my turn? Not that we are wishing suicide or anything like that, but you know what I'm trying to say? Like, we're so ready for heaven, we're so ready to be with the Lord that this life doesn't matter anymore. But people who can't conceive eternity, this life is all that matters to them. And that is a sad thing, because we know, this may be the closest to heaven some people may get. But for believers, this is the closest to hell we get. So we're trying to get super far away from hell and as close to the Lord as possible. But people who don't know the Lord, this is their heaven, and they have no conception of what happens after this. They think it's just like it was before they were born, which we can't even conceive either, because we only can remember remembering. We can't remember not. You know what I'm saying? That may be a little confusing, but I think y'all know what I'm trying to say. But I'm going to end this video. This is just what it's like before I go to bed. So all glory goes to God. I just love who I serve. I just love who I serve, man. We serve a great God, the living God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Almighty, Jehovah Jireh. He is who he is. I am Alpha and Omega. That's who I worship. Yahweh. Thank you, Jesus. And then he sent his only son to die for us. Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. But yeah, I'm going to be done rambling. I know I said that like 10 times, family, but I love y'all so very much. If you need prayers, drop them down below. But if not, still love y'all. Give your life to Jesus. He's the only way we can be saved. But I love y'all, family. Peace.